Why being born P. Diddy Suck? He was born into a world that had no intention of being gentle with him. Not the kind of world where effort guarantees safety or where talent alone is enough to survive. This was a world where you either learned the rules fast or disappeared. And he learned early that no one was coming to save him. From a young age, one idea settled deep into his mind. If you don't control the situation will control you. Power wasn't optional, it was protection. And being powerless was the one thing he feared more than failure itself. He didn't dream of fame the way most people do. He wasn't obsessed with applause or admiration. What fascinated him were the people standing just off stage, the ones deciding who got the spotlight and who never would. He noticed early that real power in the music industry didn't belong to the loudest voice on the mic, but to the person who decided whether that mic existed at all. When he entered the music business, he didn't see art first. He saw structure, contracts, hierarchies, leverage. He understood that talent might open the door, but control decided who stayed inside. And from the beginning, he wanted more than a seat at the table. He wanted to build the table himself. Creating his own label looked like the start of a classic success story. A young, ambitious figure gathering talent, creating momentum, promising opportunity. To the outside world, it felt like a movement, a family, a new era. And at first, that wasn't an illusion. People really did rise around him. Careers were built, money flowed, doors opened. Success reinforced his belief that his instincts were right. But as the empire grew, so did the pressure to keep it together. Every new level came with higher stakes. Every mistake became more dangerous. Trust started to feel like a liability. Control started to feel like necessity. Slowly, relationships stopped being partnerships. Everything began to run through him. Decisions, resources, approvals. The system worked, but only as long as he remained at the center. People around him adjusted. Some complied. Some stayed silent. And silence became mistaken for loyalty. Power has a way of isolating the people who hold it. He grew accustomed to being the final authority, to walking into rooms and watching the energy shift. That feeling is intoxicating. It creates the illusion of absolute security, and at the same time, it quietly cuts you off from reality. Over time, music stopped being the core of his world. It became a tool, a backdrop. What mattered more was the image, the unshakable presence of someone who was always in control, someone who never hesitated, someone who never looked weak. The parties grew bigger, the lifestyle louder, the symbolism heavier. None of it was random. It was a constant signal to the world. I'm untouchable. I'm still on top. But no era lasts forever. The industry began to change. Slowly, at first. New voices, new values, new questions. Behaviors that once stayed behind closed doors started to surface. Things that were once ignored became impossible to overlook. At first, it felt like noise. He had survived rumors before. Scandals faded. The machine kept running. He believed it always would. This time, it didn't. Because this wasn't about a single incident or a temporary controversy. It was about the entire image, the entire structure of power he represented. He had become a symbol, not just of success, but of an era people were now re-examining. The tone shifted, conversations changed, admiration turned into scrutiny, support turned into distance. People who once stayed quiet started speaking. People who once feared consequences began asking questions. For the first time, he was facing a force he couldn't dominate. The tools that once protected him stopped working. Silence looked suspicious. Statements made things worse. Every move was interpreted through someone else's narrative. Control, the thing that had defined his entire life, no longer guaranteed safety. The fall didn't come all at once. There was no single moment, no dramatic collapse. It was slower than that, a gradual realization that he no longer controlled the story being told about him. He still had money. He still had recognition. But the power dynamic had shifted. For the first time, he was reacting instead of directing. defending instead of commanding, watching instead of deciding. And that's where the real tragedy lives. His entire identity was built around control. Control had been his shield, his language, his survival strategy. And once the world stopped responding to that language, he was left without a way to exist inside it. He never learned how to be vulnerable, never learned how to step down, never learned who he was without being on top. The past he believed was locked in place turned out to be alive. Stories resurfaced, context changed, judgments shifted, and the deeper it went, the clearer it became. There was no reset button. He wanted to be remembered as a builder, as an architect of culture, as someone who turned chaos into an empire. And he did leave a mark. But history doesn't care about intentions. It only records outcomes. And when you become the face of an era, you inherit not only its achievements, but its failures. That's why being born P. Diddy is messed up. Not because he rose too high, but because he built his entire life on control and eventually lived long enough to see a world that no longer accepts it. This isn't a story about a villain, and it's not a story about a hero. It's the story of a man who mastered the rules of his time and became trapped by them when the rules changed. And in that sense, his story isn't unique. It's a warning.